Could you put Matt V on the 1-3 list?
We don't do call-ins for 1-3 anymore, I'm sorry.
All right, could you put me on the 2-5 list then?
Yeah, Matt B?
Yep.
Check in within 1 hour.
Sure, thanks.
No problem.
Bye. No more call-ins for 1-3. No intro today either. Let's go. On the call-in list for 2-5. Shouldn't be a long wait. Let's get to it. In this session, I decided to hop back into some 2-5. Just kind of get back to it. See if I could book a bigger win than $8 this time around. And I ended up getting called pretty quickly to start a new game, which was great, but not very many people actually showed up. So we ended up starting just four-handed, expecting the table to fill. It was very busy, so this was a new must move. People would have to be coming to this table specifically, so we weren't too worried about it. So that being said, they basically started the game around me because when I was first called for a seat, they'd called someone else for it who was behind me, but he'd already been moved from another game. Didn't really want to kick him out, so I just let him take it. Ended up waiting another 10 or 15 minutes, and then they just opened a game around the table I was sitting at, so thanks for that. So in this first hand, where you are four-handed, I'm in the big blind with Jack-4 offsuit, folds around in the small blind, and he decides to complete. I don't think there's a real reason to raise, and I don't have to put any more money in, so I just go ahead and check my option. Flop comes 5-4 deuce with two diamonds. He leads out, and I make the call. Turns a deuce of hearts, putting a second flush draw on the board and pairing the bottom card from the flop. Small blind leads again, and again I choose to call. The river's a 7 of hearts, which brings in the backdoor flush, and he now bets 40. I don't necessarily think there's a lot of 5x that he would bet 3 streets with, and I think most overpairs here he would have raised with preflop, so I don't put him on a lot of value hands. There's a few hands that I beat, like other 4x that he might bet like this sort of to block, so I go ahead and make the call. He shows me red pocket 3s, so I'm going to take this first one down. In this next hand, we've added 1 or 2 players to the table, so there's actually 3 limps to me, and I'm in the small blind with 9 out of hearts. It is literally the next hand. I choose to just complete here. Don't really want to raise from this position to try to isolate. Big blind checks his option, so we're going 5 ways to a flop. The flop comes ace 8-7 with 2 hearts. Definitely above average for this holding, but I decided to check because I think a lot of people would be limping in with ace-x, and I don't think I'm going to get a fold through very easily. That being said, if somebody does bet, I am probably planning to check raise and obviously willing to get this hand in. I just have so much raw equity if I see 2 more cards. Ends up checking through though, and the turn is a 5 of diamonds. I actually don't really like what I ended up doing here. I ended up leading out for $15. I just think there's so many hands that have now connected either via turning an open-ended straight draw or even making a straight, or sets or 2 pairs with this card. So I don't really like my bet at all, but I did bet 15. The big blind, who's next to act, makes the call, and under the gun, who initially limped in, ends up making it 65. Middle position now cold calls the 65. Pretty awkward situation. I have a gut shot now to go along with my flush draw and my pair. It feels unlikely that anything other than a straight will be good, and a straight might only get me a chop. I definitely don't think hitting trips is going to be good enough when I'm facing this action. I think it's pretty close, but I do end up making the call. I think the flush is likely to be good. I think the straight is likely to be good. And frankly, it's just pretty hard to fold a hand like this. Big blind tanks and says something about the price he's getting before ultimately calling, so we actually go 4 ways to the river. The river's the 3 of clubs. I have obviously missed, so I just check. I'm completely done with this hand. The big blind checks too. Under the gun now bets out 150. Middle position folds. I fold. The big blind kind of hems and haws, but looks like he might be Hollywooding before jamming. It's about 350, and under the gun snap calls. The big blind has 4 deuce offsuit for a wheel. He hit a gut shot on the turn and called and got there, but under the gun has 6-4 for a higher straight. Our gut shot was good, Probably wouldn't have gotten any action on it. Our flush may or may not have been good. Kind of depends on what middle position had. Just kind of one of those spots that's pretty difficult to let it go. So after that hand, I ended up getting moved to another table. They had to make a decision about whether they were going to continue, I think, down to four-handed again because two of us got called. So this table is with all new opponents. While I was waiting for the new seat, I got to meet Tony, who came over and said hi. So nice to meet you, Tony. After getting moved to this table, I ran into Sam, who I've played with a couple of times, and we just chatted for a little bit. So good to see you again, Sam. In this hand, there's a middle position limp. I'm in MP2, and I bump it up to 30 with black pocket queens. The hijack, the cutoff, the big blind, and the limper all call, so we actually go 5 ways to the flop. Flop comes jack, 7-6, two-tone. The big blind checks, and middle position now leads for $80. I haven't been at the table that long, and I've already seen him do this several times, so he definitely doesn't have to be nutted here. He doesn't have to have a draw either. I put him on a range that's primarily hands like strong combo draws, but also jack X, maybe occasionally 10s or 9s, something like that. This pot is already so bloated that I don't really see a point in making a small raise here, so I just actually end up putting it in for 490. It folds around him and he tanks for about 2 minutes before ultimately calling. We are probably in good shape when he takes this long to call, so hopefully just gonna hold here. Want to see some brick turns and rivers. I guess a queen wouldn't hurt either. The turn is a jack of diamonds. Not my favorite card in the deck, but we're not necessarily dead yet. The river's the ace of spades. Also a pretty bad card. He ends up fast rolling ace jack before I can turn my hand over, and obviously that's gonna be good. So not off to the greatest start in this session. Toss in a rebuy, and we are back in the mix. In this hand, it folds to me in the cutoff. Pretty rare occurrence on this table so far. I looked down at king 4 of hearts and decided to get a little bit out of line, get a little bit frisky here. I opened it up to $25. Pre-flop, police be damned. Big blind, who's pretty loose, ends up making the call. He has not been folding his blinds that often, so I think that could kind of make a case for this open being a little bit better because we're actually going to have the best hand pretty often. The flop comes 6 rainbow and he checks. I decide to c-bet 35 and he makes the call. The turn's the 7 of diamonds, just no waiting, brings in the straight for us. He now leads for 75 and he's only got about 175 behind, so I don't think we necessarily need a raise here to protect. There's not a lot of cards that we're really worried about seeing, and I think we're going to chop fairly often, but the times that we don't, I think if we raise here, we might just get him off of hands that we might otherwise win some money from. So I decided to call. The river's a jack, and he just jams in the rest of the 175 he's got behind. Obviously, I have a pretty quick snap call here. He turns over king 7, and that's just a pair of 7s, so my straight's going to win. Guy who has been opening and c-betting a lot and also leading a lot. He's from this ace-jack hand previously that I lost with pocket queens. He opens to $15 in middle position. I call with ace-10 of spades next to act in the hijack, and the cutoff and the big blind also call. So we're going 4 ways to a flop. Flop's 10-9-3 with 1 spade, and it checks around in middle position. He puts out a c-bet of $60, and even though this is pretty big, he doesn't really narrow his range down to something good. I've seen him c-bet a lot in multi-way pots where he just can't really be that strong based on what happened on later streets. So I think I have a pretty easy call here. The big blind also ends up calling, so we continue to the turn 3 ways. The turn is the king of spades, which I have pretty mixed feelings about. It does hit queen jack, it does hit any king X overcards, and it improves me to a flush draw. But I now only have second pair. Big blind checks and middle position c-bets again for 115. I really don't love the situation, but his sizing I think makes it so that I pretty much have to call. I can hit a 10 or an ace most of the time to still be good. And even if those aren't good, my flush draw is definitely still alive since that's to the nuts. However, the big blind has some other plans because he check raises all in for 390. Middle position tanks and eventually folds, and I'm put in a pretty awkward spot. It sure looks like big blind has queen jack most of the time here. It was very consistent with how he played in the hand. But at the same time, there should be some other holdings he's willing to check jam here. Things like king 10, king 9, perhaps 10-9 or a set. So if his range contains those other hands, I can barely call profitably. But if his range shrinks to pretty much just queen jack and sets, then I'm in worse shape and I can't really call. At the end of the day, I just talked myself into thinking that he could probably play king 10, king 9, or maybe 10-9 this way. And I do call it off since at that point, my ace is going to be good on top of my flush draw. It still ends up being very close to break even, so I think this is a good spot to just let it go. But in game, I wasn't able to kind of do all the analysis on the exact pot odds and my exact equity against his probable range. So in the end, I think I give up a couple bucks by calling here, but I did put in the call and we're off to a river card. The river ends up breaking out and it's not looking good for my hand. He turns over queen jack offsuit, so yeah, nothing really unexpected here. He's going to take this one down, and I think he played it pretty well. I probably could have gotten away from it. In this hand, I'm in middle position with queen jack, and I open it to $20. 4 players call, so we're playing yet another multi-way pot here. 5 ways to the flop, 5 players trying to win this pot. Flop comes out 10-8-8 with 2 clubs. Checks to me, and I don't really love c-betting here, but I was kind of in a spot where I was getting a little bit tired of not winning any hands, not really winning anything substantial, and kind of just wanted to take it down. I do have 2 overs in a gut shot, but I would not say that this is really a profitable c-bet into so many players. But I do end up c-betting for 65. There's a crazy loose guy on my left who makes the call, and a solid guy that I played a couple hands with earlier in the session that were smaller, and he makes the call as well. When both of these players just call, I don't really ever expect them to have an 8. I think either of them would have raised. And so it's at least good that we haven't been raised yet. The turn is a 5 of diamonds, which I think is a pretty great card just because it doesn't really improve any hands in their ranges, and because I don't think either of them have anything better than just a 10 or maybe open-ended, I decided to do something a little unorthodox here and just jam. The hijack has about $400, and he is the pretty loose one, and the button has just $250. But I think he's going to be calling off a little tighter as well. So it kind of worked out where the guy who has a lot more hands in his range probably called with more hands, but because he had so many to begin with, that's kind of okay. And the tighter player is just going to be folding a lot of his 10x here, I think. He's very solid. He's going to put me on a lot of overpairs in this spot. And the fact that I've c-bet twice now into, more than one player, I think gives me a lot of credence here. They do both ultimately fold, and I'm going to take this one down, albeit a little bit sheepishly. Now I've been in this session for quite a while. I'm just about even for the day so far, but obviously sitting on a little bit of a bigger stack than I started with since I've rebought. In this hand, I'm under the gun with pocket 6s, and I open to $25. Only the button calls, and we go heads up to a flop. Flop comes down the beautiful queen jack 6. There's 2 clubs on board, and obviously there's a lot of hands in his range that will connect with a queen, a jack, or some kind of draw. So I'm obviously going to put out a bet. I see bet $40. Could maybe even go bigger, but I go with 40. He makes the call pretty quickly, and we're going to a turn card. Turns a jack of diamonds, which is a great card. A lot of times he's going to pick up trips. When he doesn't, it's still not a card that's probably going to scare away a queen or a draw necessarily. I don't think he's going to put a lot of jack X in my range, so there's really no reason to slow down betting here. I put out a $90 bet, and he makes the call again. The river's a 3 of diamonds, total brick, and I was a little bit on the fence about betting or checking here, but I think he's going to check back a queen pretty much always if I check. He will bet a jack, but I can just bet big here and target a large part of that range. I also don't necessarily think he's going to bet any missed draws if I check it over to him, so I think we have to put the bet out here. I make it big though, because anything he really has that's not that good won't call any size bet, so I'm not really targeting that. I'd rather target his solid queen X and any jack X in his range. So I put out 240, and he basically snap calls. Not sure if he had a queen or a jack, but we obviously rolled over, and it's of course good. So nice to take this one down near the end of the session. Managed to book a much bigger win this time than last time around. And to top it all off, right near the end of my session, ended up having a quick chat with a guy named John, who's seen the vlog a few times, and I run into him a lot live. Turns out he actually works at MGM, which I didn't even realize. I didn't, recognize him without the suit and everything. So, John, good to officially finally meet you, and appreciate you coming up and saying hi. Hope to run into you again soon. Subscribe if you guys haven't. Hit that thumbs up button if you like this video. Leave me a comment telling me what you thought. and share this video with your friends. Oh yeah, and there's like this little bell icon, you know, when you subscribe, it gives you notifications if you want those about when I put out videos. I think you should do it. Click it. Just click it. Oh man, it's cold. Oh, it's cold. You can see my breath. It's like 7 degrees right now. I am literally shivering. I did not come dressed for this. So that session was another one where I played pretty much from behind the whole session. But I did manage to bring it back. There's a couple big hands that got me there. Most notably the boat that I made. And I don't know what the guy had, but I kind of assumed that it was a jack. So all in all, got into the game for just 1,000. Nothing too crazy for 2.5. And in for 1,000, out for 1,700. I am so cold. I really need to get driving so this car warms up faster. And I have nothing else to tell you except subscribe. Subscribe. Leave a thumbs up, leave a comment, share this with your friends, and I'll see you guys next time when it's hopefully warmer.